The Xylophonian armada hung in the deep darkness of space, silent and still. From a distance, the ships looked like sharp, silver knives cutting through the black void. There were hundreds of them, perfectly organized in a grid formation. They did not need engines running to stay in place, their technology was far beyond that. They were a civilization that had existed for thousands of years, traveling from star to star. They considered themselves the masters of the galaxy. They were efficient, logical, and very proud. Inside the main ship, called the Dominator, the air was cool and smelled like clean metal. The bridge was a large circle with many screens glowing with soft blue light. There were no loud noises, no shouting, and no rushing. The crew moved with slow, careful steps. They believed that panic was a waste of energy. Commander Eris stood in the center of the room. He was tall, with pale skin and large, dark eyes that saw more colors than any human could. He wore a suit made of shiny fabric that fit his body perfectly. He looked at the giant screen in front of him. On the screen, there was a blue and white planet. It was Earth. To Eris, Earth looked small and weak. It was a tiny rock floating in a huge, dangerous universe. He had seen many planets like this before. He had conquered many of them. He knew the pattern well. The Xylophonians would arrive, show their power, and the people on the planet would give up. It was the smart thing to do. Fighting a superior force was illogical. It meant death for no reason. Lieutenant Illyra, Eris said. His voice was calm and flat. A young woman stepped forward from her station. She had silver hair pulled back tight and wore the same uniform as the commander. She was the communications officer. Yes, Commander, she answered. What is the status of the planet? Are they aware of us? Illyra touched a few buttons on her smooth glass panel. Yes, Commander. Their primitive technology has detected us. They are very active. We are picking up thousands of radio signals and digital messages coming from the surface. They are confused. Eris nodded slightly. That is normal. They are looking at the sky and seeing something they cannot explain. They are afraid. Illyra looked at her screen closely. Their confusion is strange, Commander. Usually, civilizations try to hide or send a message of peace. These humans are shouting at each other. They are arguing. But I am also detecting energy spikes coming from their military bases. They are turning on their weapons. Eris let out a small, dry sound that was like a laugh. Weapons against us, their rockets are like toys compared to our shields. They are just scared children holding up sticks. Shall I open a channel? Illyra asked. We should tell them to stop. Yes, Eris said. Follow Protocol 7. We will give them one chance to save themselves. I do not want to waste ammo on a planet that could be useful to us. Illyra typed quickly. Channel open, broadcasting on all their frequencies. I am translating our language into their main dialect, which they call English. The giant screen changed. The view of the blue planet remained, but a symbol of the Xylophonian Empire appeared in the corner. It was a golden circle with 3 lines through it. Then, a loud, booming voice filled the silence of the bridge and the airwaves of Earth. The voice was deep, robotic, and echoed with power. People of Earth, the voice began. This is the Xylophonian Armada. You are surrounded. Your weapons are useless. Your defenses are nothing. We are here to take control of your planet. If you resist, you will be destroyed. If you cooperate, you will be spared. Eris crossed his arms. He watched the planet, waiting for the panic to stop. He waited for the calls for surrender to begin. The voice continued, counting down the seconds. You have 20 seconds to comply. Lay down your weapons. Stop your military vehicles. Send a signal of peace. You have 20 seconds. In the center of the screen, a red timer appeared. 20. 19. 18. This is too easy, Eris thought. He looked at Illyra. Check the surrender counter. Is anyone surrendering? Illyra shook her head slowly. No, sir. I am reading, chaos. The traffic on their communication networks is going up, not down. They are not saying we surrender. Perhaps they are slow, Eris said. Their brains are small. 15. 14. 13. Commander, Illyra said. Her voice sounded a little worried now. The energy spikes are getting stronger. They are not just turning on the radar. They are firing up their main engines. On the ground and in space. They are preparing to flee, Eris asked. No, Illyra said. The vectors are wrong. They are not turning away. They are turning towards us. 10. 9. 8, Eris frowned. He walked closer to the screen. That is suicide. They cannot harm our ships. Their logic is flawed. Do they not understand that they will die? Maybe they do not care, Illyra whispered. On Earth, in a secret command center deep under the ground, a man named Captain Tom was watching the same timer. The room was dark, lit only by the red glow of the screens and the flashing warning lights. Soldiers were running back and forth, shouting orders. The air smelled like coffee and sweat. Tom sat in a heavy chair, wearing a green flight suit. He looked tired, but his eyes were hard. He had served in the military for 30 years. He had seen many things, but he had never seen an alien fleet. He knew the math. The humans had old ships. The aliens had advanced technology. Report. Tom shouted into his microphone. Sir, the enemy fleet is holding position, a young voice said. It was Lieutenant Jen. She was sitting in a small, cramped cockpit miles above the Earth, inside a heavy fighter ship known as a Bulldog. It was an ugly, bulky ship, heavily armored and packed with big engines. They are waiting for us to give up. Are we giving up? Tom asked. Jen looked at the picture of her family taped to the dashboard of her ship. Then she looked at the silver ships outside her window. No, sir. We are not. 7. 6. 5. On the alien bridge, Commander Eris was starting to feel annoyed. He hated waiting. He hated inefficiency. Why are they so stubborn, he asked. This is illogical. They are going to die. Sir, I have a direct link from their command center, Illyra said suddenly. A human wants to speak to us. Put it through, Eris ordered. Maybe they have finally come to their senses. 4. 3. The screen flickered. The blue planet shrank to the corner. A new face appeared. It was an older human male with gray hair and a stern face. It was Captain Tom. The timer kept counting. 2. 1. 0. The timer stopped. The alien ship held its breath, waiting for the words "we surrender." Tom looked into the camera lens. He didn't look afraid. He looked tired, but there was a fire in his eyes that Eris did not understand. This is Captain Tom of Earth Defense, the human said. His voice was calm and clear. Eris leaned forward. Proceed, human. Send your surrender code. Tom took a deep breath. "We heard your warning," he said. "We heard your countdown." "Then you know you have no choice," Eris said. "Lower your shields." Tom smiled a little, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who has nothing left to lose. "You made a mistake, Commander. You assumed we are like you. You assumed we want to survive more than we want to win." Eris paused. "What are you talking about?" "You asked for surrender," Tom said. "But we don't know the meaning of that word today. You said we have 20 seconds. Well, our 20 seconds are up." "We are waiting," Eris said, his voice growing cold. "Surrender, or we will fire." Tom's grip on the console tightened. He remembered all the people on the streets, looking up at the sky in fear. He remembered his own children. He knew the human ships could not beat the aliens with guns. The aliens were too strong, their armor too thick. But the humans had something else. They had mass. And they had anger. "No," Tom said softly. "We are not surrendering." "Then you choose death," Eris said. "We choose collision," Tom said. Suddenly, the bridge of the alien ship erupted in noise. "Commander!" Illyra screamed. Her voice was no longer calm. "Look at the sensors. The human fleet, they are accelerating. Maximum speed." Eris spun around to look at the tactical map. The red dots representing human ships were moving. But they were not spreading out to attack from a distance. They were clustering together. They were aiming directly at the Xylofian grid. "What are they doing?" Eris whispered. "Stop them. Fire warning shots." "It is too late," Illyra shouted. "They are not slowing down. They are coming right for us." Captain Tom looked at the alien commander one last time. "Humanity answers," he said, and he cut the feed. The silence that followed the countdown was heavy and terrifying on the bridge of the Xylofian flagship. Commander Eris stared at the black screen where the human face had been just a moment ago. The words "we choose collision" echoed in his mind. He could not process them. In all his years of conquest, in all the history of his proud civilization, no one had ever chosen to crash instead of submitting. It was against the laws of nature. Every living thing wanted to live. To choose death over slavery was a logic error. "Illyra," Eris said, his voice shaking slightly. "What is the status of the human fleet? Why have the communication lines gone dead?" Illyra was typing furiously on her glass panel. Her usually pale face was flushed with fear. The calm atmosphere of the bridge was gone. Warning lights began to flash, turning the cool blue room into a strobe of angry red. "Sir, they are not communicating anymore," she said, her voice rising. "They are not sending surrender codes. They are sending data packets." "Targeting data." "Targeting data for what?" Eris asked. "Their weapons are offline. They are not charging their lasers. They are not charging lasers because they are not going to fire," Illyra realized, her eyes going wide with horror. She looked up from her screen to the main view of space. "Look, Commander. Look at the radar." Eris turned to the large tactical map. It showed the positions of all the ships in the sector. The Xylofian ships were represented by gold triangles, sitting still and majestic. The human ships were red dots. Usually, in a battle, the red dots would spread out. They would try to dance around, to find weak spots in the shields. But these red dots were not dancing. They were moving in straight lines. And they were moving fast. "The acceleration rates are impossible," Eris muttered. Their engines cannot handle that stress. Their structural integrity will fail. They are overriding the safety limiters, Illyra said. I am reading life signs inside the human ships. The pilots are still inside. They are pushing their bodies to the limit. The G-force, it must be crushing them. Why? Eris shouted, slamming his hand on the console. This accomplishes nothing. If they hit our shields, they will vaporize. Our shields are too strong for simple metal. They are not aiming for the shields, sir, Illyra said, her voice trembling. Look at the vectors. They are aiming for the shield generators. They are aiming for the bridges. They are concentrating their entire mass on single points. On Earth, the situation was frantic. Inside the cockpit of her Bulldog fighter, Lieutenant Jen was struggling to stay conscious. The ship was shaking violently. The alarms were blaring in her ears, screaming that the engine was overheating and the hull was groaning under the pressure. She could barely breathe. Every breath felt like a heavy weight sitting on her chest. Her vision was narrowing, becoming a tunnel. But she kept her hand gripped tight on the throttle. She pushed it all the way forward, locking it in place. Hold together, baby, she whispered through gritted teeth. Just hold together for 10 more seconds. Her radar screen showed the silver wall of the alien fleet ahead of her. It looked beautiful and terrifying. Behind her, she knew the rest of the human squadron was doing the exact same thing. They were not firing missiles. They were not trying to dodge. They were turning themselves into the bullets. All wings, report, Jen's voice crackled over the radio. It was weak, but steady. Squadron leader here, a voice came back. It sounded distorted, full of static. Engine 3 is gone. I'm drifting, but I have momentum. I'm still aiming for the carrier. Squadron 2, another voice said. My pilot is unconscious. I'm engaging autopilot ramming speed. Locking onto the largest ship. Good luck, everyone, Jen said. She looked at the picture of her family one last time, then she blacked out for a second. The ship's computer screamed at her, telling her to pull up, to decelerate, to save her life. She hit the override button. The computer silenced. She was now a missile. Back on the alien bridge, Commander Eris watched the simulation. The computer was calculating the impact probability. Sir, Illyra said. We need to raise shields to full front. We need to fire the defensive batteries. Fire at will, Eris ordered. But surely they will turn away. They have to turn away. They are seconds away from impact. They are not turning, sir. Illyra cried out. Collision warning. Collision warning. Impact in 10 seconds. Impact in 9 seconds. The view screen zoomed in on the leading edge of the Xylofian fleet. The human ships were small, ugly specks of rust and paint against the sleek silver of the alien vessels. But they were moving with terrifying speed. The friction of the atmosphere was turning them into torches of fire. They are crazy, Eris muttered. They are absolute maniacs. 7 seconds, the computer voice announced calmly. Sir, the battleship Atlas, Illyra pointed out. Look at the Atlas. The Atlas was the largest ship the humans had. It was a massive, slow-moving fortress. But now, its engines were glowing with a blue light that Eris had never seen before. It had turned its entire bulk around. It was not firing its guns. It was using its main thrusters to push itself backward, directly into the heart of the Xylofian formation. It is too big to stop, Illyra said. If it hits one of our cruisers, the kinetic energy will be catastrophic. Evade! Eris shouted. Order the fleet to scatter. Move. It was too late. The Xylophians were used to fighting at long ranges. They were used to slow, graceful battles where ships danced and traded fire from thousands of miles apart. They were not ready for a knife fight where the enemy ran at you with a knife in their teeth. 5 seconds, the computer said. The silence of space was shattered by the impacts. First came the fighters. There were hundreds of them. They slammed into the Xylophian energy shields. For a brief moment, the shields flared bright blue, absorbing the energy. But there were too many. The shields were designed to stop energy blasts, not solid objects moving at 5 times the speed of sound. One by one, the shields around the front ships collapsed. They flickered and died. And then the human fighters hit the hulls. They didn't explode with fire, because there was no air in space to make fire. They exploded with force and debris. A bulldog fighter struck the bridge of a Xylophian destroyer. The metal crumpled like paper. The alien ship spun out of control, its bridge instantly turned into dust. Eris gripped the railing of his own bridge as the shock waves rocked the ship. Report! He screamed. We have lost the first line of defense. Illyra shouted. The destroyers Vor and Kill are gone. They were rammed. The humans, they used their own ships as kinetic projectiles. How can they do this? Eris asked, watching the destruction in disbelief. They are killing themselves just to scratch us. They are not scratching us, sir. They are breaking through. Illyra yelled. The Atlas is on a collision course with the dreadnought Relentless. On the screen, the massive human ship Atlas looked like a falling building. It was burning and venting air, but it did not slow down. The alien dreadnought tried to move its massive bulk, but it was too slow. The Atlas slammed into the side of the dreadnought. The sound was silent, but the visual was deafening. The Atlas tore through the outer hull of the dreadnought. It ripped decks apart, sending equipment and aliens flying into the void. The two ships became one tangled mess of twisting metal. Then, the core of the Atlas detonated. It wasn't a weapon, it was the ship's reactor overloading. A ball of white light swallowed both ships. The explosion pushed the nearby Xylophian cruisers away. It was a shockwave of pure violence. Eris fell to his knees as the floor shook. Consoles sparked and shattered. Glass rained down from the ceiling. Illyra! He called out. She was pulling herself up from the floor, blood running from her forehead. I am here, Commander. The status of the fleet, Eris demanded, standing up slowly. He looked around the bridge. His crew was panicked. They were not soldiers, they were technicians and scholars. They had never seen violence like this. We have lost 12 ships, Illyra reported, her voice shaking. And the humans, they have lost hundreds of ships. They are all gone, sir. The entire human vanguard is debris. Eris looked at the screen. It was true. The space in front of the Earth was filled with floating wreckage. The human fighters were gone. They had sacrificed themselves to take out a fraction of the Xylophian fleet. You see, Eris said, trying to find his logic again. It was a waste. They died. We are still here. We still have more ships than they do. Illyra looked at the data stream again. She looked at the planet below. The debris field was spreading out, creating a cloud of metal between the aliens and Earth. Sir, look at the planet, she whispered. They are not stopping. What do you mean? Eris asked. They have no ships left. The mining stations, Illyris said. The orbital platforms. The satellites. They are detaching. Even the civilian ships, the cargo haulers, they are all turning their engines on. They are all accelerating toward us. Eris felt a cold chill run down his spine. He looked at the tactical map again. The red dots were reappearing. Thousands of them. It wasn't a military attack anymore. It was a planetary attack. Every piece of metal that humanity owned was being thrown at them. They are not going to surrender, Illyris said softly. They are going to throw the entire world at us until we leave or we die. Eris watched the screen. He realized then that the humans had not lost. They had just started. They were willing to turn their entire civilization into a weapon. And he did not know how to fight an enemy that did not fear death. Prepare the shields, Eris said, his voice hollow. We are in for a long day. The space above Earth was no longer silent. The void, usually a place of absolute peace and quiet, was now filled with the sounds of destruction. The Xylophonian sensors, designed to detect the subtle hum of energy fields, were screaming with the noise of grinding metal and expanding gas. Commander Eris stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the debris field float in the dark. The first wave of human ships was gone. They had become dust and twisted wreckage, just like he predicted. But the victory felt like a defeat. We are still here, Eris said, trying to convince himself. Our hull is strong. We survived the impact. Illyris stood at her station, wiping blood from her forehead. Yes, Commander. But the humans, they have changed the rules. On the main screen, the view zoomed in on the path between Earth and the Armada. Usually, space was empty. Now, it was crowded. The humans were not sending professional warships anymore. They were sending everything they had. I am reading objects on a collision course, Illyris said. Thousands of them. They are not ships. They are cargo containers. Mining equipment. Communication satellites. They are using their thrusters to push themselves toward us. Space debris, Eris asked, confused. How can a box of rocks hurt us? A box of rocks moving at 20,000 miles per hour is a bomb, Illyris said, her voice tight. Individually, they are weak. But together, they create a wall of kinetic energy. If they hit our sensors or our weapon ports, they will disable us. Eris watched the tactical map. The red dots were swarming like angry bees. They were not coordinated attacks, they were a tidal wave of garbage. It was terrifying because it was so desperate. The humans were stripping their own planet of its tools just to throw them at the aliens. Fire the point defense lasers, Eris ordered. Shoot down the debris. Do not let them touch the hull. The Xylophonian ships began to spin up their lasers. Beams of green light shot out, vaporizing the incoming objects. But for every rock they destroyed, 2 more took its place. It was a waste of energy. The aliens were fighting trash, and the humans were saving their real strength. Sir, look at the energy readings from the planet, Illyris said suddenly. Something big is happening. Eris looked at the screen. On the surface of Earth, in the middle of the ocean, a massive fleet was rising. These were not small fighters. These were the heavy battleships of the human navy. They had been hiding underwater, using the ocean as a shield. The Atlas was a distraction, Eris realized. They hid their real strength under the water. The battleships were huge, black, and ugly. They bristled with guns that looked primitive compared to Xylophonian technology. But they were heavy. Very heavy. As they broke the surface of the water, they fired their main engines all at once. They did not fly up gracefully. They clawed their way into the sky, fighting gravity with raw power. They are launching all their missiles, Illyra warned. It is a saturation attack. They are firing too many for us to stop. Raise shields. Eris shouted. Prepare for impact. The sky above Earth lit up with the fire of 1,000 rocket engines. It looked like a rain of fire going upward instead of downward. The missiles were old. They used chemical fuel and simple warheads. They were not guided by smart computers. They were just pointed at the alien fleet. The missiles reached the Xylofian formation. The shields flared blue as the first wave hit. The explosions rippled across the energy barriers like rain on a pond. The shields held, but the energy levels dropped rapidly. Shields at 70%, Illyra said. We are taking damage to the shield generators. They are targeting the same spot over and over. They are trying to break through, Eris muttered. Relentless. Suddenly, a large cargo ship, painted orange with the logo of a mining company, appeared out of the smoke. It was not firing weapons. It was just driving forward. It had been stripped of all its cargo to make it lighter and faster. Commander, that ship is on a direct course for us, Illyra said. It is not changing direction. Destroy it, Eris said calmly. The lasers fired, slicing through the cargo ship's engines. But the ship had too much momentum. Even without engines, it kept gliding forward. It was massive, the size of a city block. It slammed into the side of the flagship, right where the shield generators were located. The impact was not an explosion, but a crushing blow. The metal groaned and tore. The shock wave threw Eris across the bridge. He hit the wall hard, gasping for air. Report. He yelled, pulling himself up. Breaches on decks 4 through 6, Illyra shouted over the noise of alarms. The shield generator is offline. We have no shields. Eris felt a cold fear grip his heart. A Xylofian ship without shields was a sitting duck. The humans knew this. They saw the hole in their defense. Look at the human battleships, Illyra cried out. They are targeting the damaged ships. The human fleet, sensing weakness, adjusted their course. They stopped throwing everything everywhere. They aimed all their remaining guns at the ships that had lost their shields. The Xylofian fleet was disciplined, but they were confused. They were used to enemies who wanted to survive. They did not know how to fight enemies who used themselves as ammunition. One of the Xylofian cruisers, the Silver Moon, took a direct hit from a human railgun. The projectile, a simple tungsten rod moving at high speed, punched through the hull. It went straight through the engine core. The Silver Moon silently broke in half, its two halves drifting away into the dark. They are using kinetic rods, Eris said, watching the destruction. No explosives. Just metal. They are turning gravity into a weapon. It is barbaric, Illyra said. They are clubbing us to death. Eris walked to the window. He looked down at the blue planet. He could see fires burning on the surface. The humans were taking heavy damage too. The alien counterfire was devastating entire cities. Millions of humans were dying. But they did not stop. They did not send a message asking for peace. They just sent more ships, more rocks, more metal. Why? Eris asked the empty room. Why do they not surrender? They cannot win. They are dying. Maybe they don't care about winning, Illyra said softly. Maybe they just want to make sure we lose too. Eris looked at the tactical map again. The debris field was thick, making it hard to maneuver. The Xylofian ships were getting stuck in the floating junk. They were sitting targets for the human battleships. "We need to retreat and regroup," Eris said. "We cannot fight in this debris." "Sir, the formation is breaking," Illyra reported. "The Iron Fist is trying to reverse engines to avoid a collision, but its engines are clogged with human drone parts. It is drifting toward the planet." The Iron Fist was one of their largest ships. It was falling into Earth's gravity well. The humans on the ground saw it. They knew what was happening. Instead of cheering, they started shooting everything they had at the falling giant. As the ship burned up in the atmosphere, it became a fireball in the sky. It looked like a second sun setting in the wrong place. The people of Earth watched it burn, and instead of hiding, they cheered. They celebrated the destruction of their own city just to see an enemy ship fall. Eris saw this on the monitor. He saw the crowds on the streets, looking up, screaming in rage and joy. It frightened him more than the missiles. "Commander," Illyra said. "I am receiving a transmission. It is coming from a human ship. It is on a direct collision course with us. The pilot is hailing us." "Accept it," Eris said. The screen flickered. It showed the inside of a cockpit. A young woman with a bandage on her head and blood on her uniform appeared. It was Lieutenant Jen. Her ship was damaged, sparks flying around her. She was smiling. "Hello, alien," Jen said. Her voice was calm, almost friendly. "I see you met my friends." "Human," Eris said. "You are going to die. Your ship is damaged. Why do you do this?" Jen laughed. It was a tired sound. "Because you are ugly. And you are rude. You came to our house and told us to leave." "We are superior," Eris said. "We could have given you a better life." "We don't want your life," Jen said. "We want ours. And if we can't have it, you can't have this planet." "Turn around," Eris said. "I will spare you." "No thanks," Jen said. She looked at her controls. "My engines are dead anyway. But my inertia is not. I am coming over for dinner." The screen went black. "She is going to ram us," Illyra said, her voice panicking. "Impact in 10 seconds. We have no shields on that side." "Evasive maneuvers," Eris shouted. "Move the ship." The flagship began to turn, but it was too big and too slow. The human fighter, a tiny speck against the massive silver hull, slammed into the side of the bridge. The explosion was deafening inside the ship. The metal wall buckled. Glass shattered. Air rushed out of the bridge, pulling consoles and chairs with it. Eris grabbed onto a railing with all his strength. The wind screamed in his ears. He saw Illyra grabbed by the force, thrown toward the hole in the wall. "Illyra!" he screamed, reaching out. He caught her hand just before she flew out into the void. Her legs were dangling in space. She looked at him, terror in her eyes. "Pull me up!" she cried. Eris grunted, straining his muscles. He pulled her back into the ship, hitting the emergency seal button. The blast doors slammed shut, cutting off the vacuum. They both lay on the floor, gasping for air. The bridge was in ruins. The lights were flickering. "Are you okay?" Eris asked. Illyra nodded, trembling. "The human, she destroyed the navigation array. We are flying blind." Eris stood up slowly. He looked at the broken window. The vacuum of space stared back at him, cold and indifferent. He realized then that the humans were not just fighting a war. They were fighting a war of extermination. They did not want to capture the Xylopheian ships. They wanted to destroy them completely. And the most terrifying thing was, they were winning. Not by being stronger, but by being willing to die. "We cannot stay here," Eris said, his voice hard. "We must leave." "Leave?" Illyra asked. "But we have only just started." "We started something we cannot finish," Eris said. "This planet is not a prize. It is a trap. And the humans, they are the bait." He looked at the red dots on the backup radar. There were still thousands coming. The humans never ran out of bullets, because they were willing to become the bullets. "Send the signal," Eris ordered. "Tell the fleet to disengage. We are falling back to the dark side of the moon." "But what about the invasion?" Illyra asked. "There is no invasion," Eris said. "There is only survival now." The order to retreat echoed through the Xylopheian fleet, but it was not an orderly withdrawal. It was a scramble for survival. The Xylopheians were creatures of logic and order. They fought in straight lines, they communicated with perfect clarity, and they followed their chain of command without question. But the battle above Earth had broken their minds. The chaos of the human attack, the debris, the kamikaze runs, the sheer refusal to die had shattered their formation. Commander Eris stood on the ruined bridge of his flagship. The emergency lights cast long, red shadows across the room. The smell of burnt circuitry and ozone filled the air. Sparks fell from the ceiling like rain. Illyra was at her station, or what was left of it. She was typing with one hand while holding a bandage to her forehead with the other. "Report," Eris said. His voice sounded hoarse. He had been shouting orders for hours. "Ships are breaking formation," Illyra said, her voice weak. "They are not following the grid. They are running blindly. The humans are targeting anyone who slows down." Eris looked at the main screen. The view was terrifying. The space around Earth was a graveyard of twisted metal. Debris from human ships and Xylopheian cruisers floated together, indistinguishable from one another. Among the wreckage, the human battleships were moving like sharks. They were fast, ugly, and aggressive. They were not trying to capture the enemy. They were trying to rip them apart. "The humans are launching the rocks," Illyra said. She was referring to the kinetic rods. The humans had realized their missiles were not strong enough to break the Xylopheian armor, so they started using gravity. They dropped heavy metal rods from space. These rods had no engines and no explosives. They were just chunks of metal, but when they fell from a high orbit, they hit with the force of a nuclear bomb. A Xylopheian cruiser, the Peacekeeper, tried to turn away. It was too late. A rod the size of a telephone pole slammed into its rear engines. There was no fire, just a crushing impact. The ship crumpled like a soda can. It spun out of control, crashing into another Xylopheian ship. Both vessels were destroyed in seconds. "They are hurting us," Eris realized. "They are pushing us toward the debris field." "The debris field is too dense for our sensors," Illyra said. "We cannot see their missiles coming until it is too late. We are flying blind." Eris watched the tactical map. The red dots of the human fleet were moving in a coordinated swarm. They were smaller and weaker, but they were many. And they were angry. They knew their home was below them. They knew their families were watching. They fought with a ferocity that the Xylopheians could not match. "Sir, I have a communication from the human leader," Illyra said. "It is Captain Tom. Eris hesitated. Put it through. The screen flickered and static cleared. Captain Tom appeared. He looked older than before. His uniform was dirty, and there was a cut on his cheek. But his eyes were burning bright. Behind him, the bridge of his ship was shaking, but his crew was working with calm intensity. "Commander Eris," Tom said. "I see you are leaving." "We are regrouping," Eris said, trying to sound dignified. "This battle is inconclusive." Tom laughed. It was a hard, cold laugh. "Inconclusive? You have lost half your fleet. Your ships are burning in our sky. You came here to conquer us. You thought we would bow down. You thought we were weak." "You are illogical," Eris said. "You are destroying yourselves just to hurt us. You cannot win this war. We have infinite resources. We can build more ships. You have only one planet." Tom leaned closer to the camera. "You are right. We have one planet. And we love it. We love it enough to burn our own cities to keep you. You have infinite resources, but you have no heart. You have no spirit. You fight for profit. We fight for our home." "You are doomed," Eris said. "Maybe," Tom said. "But we are taking you with us. Look at your screen, Eris. Look behind you." Eris turned to the rear view camera. His eyes went wide. The humans had not just been attacking from the front. While the Xylofians were focused on the battleships in front of them, the humans had moved smaller, stealth ships to the back. They had placed massive mining charges on the asteroids in the nearby belt. Now, they were detonating them. The explosion was silent in the vacuum of space, but the visual was terrifying. The asteroids shattered, sending a wave of shrapnel flying toward the Xylofian rear guard. "Collision alert!" Illyra screamed. "Multiple impacts. The engines of the Guardian are gone. The Defender is venting atmosphere." The Xylofian formation was collapsing. The ships at the back were being destroyed by flying rocks. The ships in the front were being hunted by human battleships. They were trapped in a box of metal and fire. "Order the fleet to jump to hyperspace," Eris shouted. "Get us out of here. Now." "But the coordinates are not calculated," Illyra cried. "If we jump now, we might end up inside a star. We could get lost in the void forever. If we stay, we die," Eris said firmly. "Jump." The Xylofian ships began to glow. They were gathering energy for their faster-than-light engines. They needed time to charge, time they did not have. The humans saw the glow. They knew the aliens were trying to run. "All forces," Tom's voice boomed over the radio. "Target the charging ships. Do not let them escape. Ram them if you have to." The human pilots were exhausted. They were out of ammo, out of fuel, and out of ships. But they still had their lives. One by one, the remaining human fighters turned away from the battle. They aimed their noses at the glowing Xylofian ships and engaged their thrusters one last time. They were not firing weapons. They were becoming weapons. A Xylofian carrier was just seconds away from jumping. Its engine was bright blue, ready to tear a hole in space. Suddenly, a small human shuttle appeared from the smoke. It hit the carrier right on the engine exhaust. The carrier's engine destabilized. The blue light turned into a violent red swirl. The ship tried to jump, but the energy collapsed. The ship imploded, sucking itself into a tiny dot before vanishing completely. "They are blocking our escape route," Eris whispered. "They are sacrificing themselves to stop us from leaving." He had never seen such hate. It was not hate for a person, or a government. It was hate for the invader. It was pure and simple. "We have to go, Commander," Illyra said, grabbing his arm. "We are next." Eris looked at the screen. He saw the human fleet closing in. He saw the debris field blocking the way back. He saw the burning planet below. "Prepare the ship," Eris said quietly. "We will jump manually. We will aim for the deep darkness. Anywhere but here." He walked to the navigation console. His hands were shaking. He was a commander of a mighty empire, but he was running away from a planet of primitives. "Illyra," he said. "Are you recording the battle logs?" "Yes, sir," she said. "Make sure you send the data to the High Council before we leave," Eris said. "They need to see this. They need to know what humanity is." "What will you tell them?" Illyra asked. Eris looked at the destruction one last time. He saw a human pilot, flying a ship that was nothing more than a burning cockpit, crashing into a Xylofian destroyer. "I will tell them," Eris said, "that this planet is not a resource. It is a trap. And that there are some things in the universe that logic cannot explain." The ship began to vibrate. The engine was roaring. "Hold on," Eris said. The flagship of the Xylofian fleet, the Dominator, pointed its nose away from the Earth. It fired its engine, piercing the debris field. Rocks and metal bounced off the hull, denting the silver armor. But the ship pushed through. Behind them, the rest of the fleet tried to follow. Some made it. Others were not so lucky. Human missiles tracked the engine's signatures, striking the Xylofian ships as they tried to accelerate. Space was filled with silent explosions, one after another. Finally, the Dominator reached the edge of the system. The stars outside began to stretch into lines of light. The ship jumped. The blue planet of Earth shrank in the distance, becoming a small dot of light. Then, it was gone. Silence returned to the bridge. The red warning light stopped flashing. The shaking stopped. Eris sat down in his chair. He felt exhausted. He looked at his hands. They were trembling. "Status?" he asked quietly. "We are in hyperspace," Illyra said. She sat on the floor, leaning against the wall. "We are alive." Eris let out a long breath. "We survived." "Did we win?" Illyra asked. Eris looked at the empty screen. He thought about Captain Tom. He thought about Lieutenant Jen, who had smiled as she crashed her ship. He thought about the endless waves of metal and rock. "No," Eris said softly. "We did not win. We just didn't lose today." He looked up at the ceiling. "But they are still there. And now, they know how to hurt us. They know we can bleed." The Xylofians traveled faster than light, moving away from the solar system at incredible speed. They left behind their dead ships, their pride, and their fear. They went back to the dark, safe places of the galaxy. But they would never forget the blue planet. They would never forget the species that looked into the face of a superior enemy and chose to crash instead of kneel. The war was over for now, but the fear would last forever. Humanity had shown the universe that they were not the prey. They were the trap. And the hunters had just barely escaped with their lives. The journey back to the Xylofian home world was long and quiet. Usually, after a mission, the crew would talk about their victory. They would share stories of their clever tactics and their superior technology. But this time, nobody spoke. The ship, the Dominator, traveled through the twisted tunnels of hyperspace, carrying a heavy silence that was louder than any explosion. The crew walked through the corridors with their heads down. They did not look at each other. They were ashamed. Commander Eris sat in his private quarters, staring at a small holographic screen. On the screen, he watched the recording of the battle for the 100th time. He watched the human ships, small and weak, crash into his silver fleet. He watched the burning Atlas tear through the dreadnought. He watched the debris field that had once been a functional defense fleet. Eris felt a strange sensation in his chest. It was tight and cold. His species did not have a word for trauma, but if they did, this would be it. He had spent his entire life believing that the Xylophians were the peak of evolution. They were smart, strong, and logical. They brought order to the chaotic universe. But the humans had broken that order. They had fought without logic, guided only by pure emotion. There was a soft chime at his door. "Come in," Eris said. The door slid open, and Illyra walked in. She looked tired. Her silver hair was messy, and there were dark circles under her large eyes. She wore a fresh uniform, but she still looked like she had been through a war. "Commander," she said. "We are approaching the home system. The High Council has requested a transmission. They want to know why we have returned early. They want to know where the invasion fleet is." Eris turned off the hologram. The image of the burning Earth faded away. "What did you tell them?" "I told them nothing," Illyra said. "I said I would let you explain." Eris stood up and walked to the window. In the distance, he could see the stars stretching out as the ship slowed down. "And what should I tell them, Illyra? That we lost, that we ran away from a planet that still uses rocket fuel?" "We didn't run away," Illyra said, though her voice lacked conviction. "We retreated to regroup. To reassess the threat." "Is that what you call it?" Eris asked, turning to face her. "Because from where I stood, it looked like we were fleeing for our lives. I saw the fear in your eyes, Illyra. I saw it in the eyes of the crew. We are not afraid of death. We are afraid of them." Illyra looked down at her feet. "I have never seen anything like it," she admitted softly. "The way they threw their ships at us. It was like they didn't care if they lived or died, as long as they took us with them. It was horrifying." Eris nodded. "We have fought many races. Some were strong. Some were smart. But all of them wanted to survive. The humans want to win. There is a difference." "Sir, the council is waiting," Illyra reminded him. "Prepare the video feed," Eris said. "I will speak to them." Illyra nodded and left the room. A few minutes later, Eris walked onto the bridge. The crew was busy preparing for the docking procedures at the giant space station that orbited their home world. The bridge was clean and calm, completely different from the ruined state it had been in during the battle. Eris stood in the center of the room and straightened his uniform. "Open the channel to the High Council." The main screen flickered. The faces of 5 elderly Xylophians appeared. They wore robes of gold and sat on high chairs in a grand hall. They looked bored and impatient. The leader of the council, a female named Elder Vora, leaned forward. "Commander Eris," Elder Vora said. "You have returned. Where is the fleet? Why is the Dominator damaged? Have you conquered the Earth?" Eris took a deep breath. He did not want to say the words. He knew the price of failure. But he could not lie. "Elder Vora," Eris began. "The invasion has failed." The bridge went silent. The crew stopped working to listen. On the screen, the elder's eyes widened in shock. "Failed?" Vora hissed. "How is that possible? You had 300 ships." The humans were primitives. Explain yourself. The humans, they are not what we predicted, Eris said. They possess technology that is inferior to ours, yes. Their ships are slower. Their weapons are weaker. But their psychology is unlike anything we have ever encountered. Spare me the psychological analysis, Vora snapped. Did you destroy them? No, Eris said. We could not. Did you try? Vora asked. We tried, Eris said. But they did not fight like soldiers. They fought like fanatics. When we gave them a chance to surrender, they refused. When we fired upon them, they did not retreat. They accelerated. What are you saying? Vora asked, confused. I am saying that they used their own ships as projectiles, Eris said. They crashed into us. They filled space with debris. They sacrificed their own lives just to scratch our hulls. They destroyed half of our fleet, Elder Vora. We did not lose a battle, we were overwhelmed by madness. On the screen, the other council members began to murmur to each other. They looked at Eris as if he had gone crazy. This is absurd, Vora said. You are telling me that a civilization without faster-than-light travel defeated the Xylofian armada by crashing into us? They did not defeat us, Eris corrected her. They made us leave. They made us realize that the cost of conquering them was too high. We could have bombarded them from orbit, yes. We could have burned their planet. But to do that, we would have had to survive their suicide attacks. We would have lost more ships. We would have lost more soldiers. They are just one planet, Vora argued. We have thousands of worlds. Why does the cost matter? Because they are not just one planet, Eris said, his voice rising with intensity. They are a virus of aggression. If we had stayed, we would have destroyed them, yes. But they would have destroyed us in the process. And for what? For a rock in a distant arm of the galaxy? It is not logical. Elder Vora stared at him for a long time. She did not look angry anymore, she looked disturbed. She could see the fear in Eris's eyes. She realized that he was not making excuses. He was truly terrified of what he had seen. So, Vora said slowly. You are recommending that we abandon the conquest of Earth? Yes, Eris said firmly. I recommend that we mark their sector as a forbidden zone. We should never go back. We should leave them alone. The council members whispered again. It was a shocking request. The Xylofians never gave up. They never retreated. But Eris was their best commander. If he said the humans were too dangerous, perhaps they were. Very well, Vora said finally. We will discuss this. Your ship is to be grounded for inspection. You and your crew will undergo psychological evaluation. You are dismissed. The screen went black. Eris let out a long breath. He had said it. He had admitted defeat. But he did not feel weak. He felt relieved. He knew that the humans were out there, crazy and alive, and that was enough for him. Illyra, Eris said. Set a course for the docking bay. We are going home. Yes, Commander, she replied. Days turned into weeks. The crew of the Dominator went back to their normal lives, but things were different. They didn't talk about the war with strangers, but they talked about it with each other. They shared stories of the human pilots who smiled as they died. They spoke of the captain who refused to surrender. One evening, Eris was sitting in a quiet park on the home world. The sky was a beautiful purple color, and the two moons were rising. It was peaceful. It was logical. It was safe. He watched the children playing. They were running and laughing, carefree. Eris felt a pang of jealousy. He thought about the children on Earth. They were not carefree anymore. They were survivors of an attack from the stars. They would grow up looking at the sky, wondering if the monsters would come back. Eris pulled a small data chip out of his pocket. It contained the audio message from the human pilot, Lieutenant Jen. He had kept it. He didn't know why. Maybe to remind himself that the universe was not just numbers and equations. He pressed play, and her voice filled his ears. Earth is not for the taking. Come back, and we will hit you again. And again. Until there is nothing left of you but dust. Eris listened to the words. They were harsh and violent. But as he listened to them in the peaceful park, he realized something. He realized that the humans were not evil. They were just, protective. They loved their home so much that they would destroy themselves to keep it. It was a terrifying kind of love, but it was also beautiful. He looked up at the stars. Earth was millions of light years away. He would never see it again. He hoped the humans would never see another Xylofian ship again either. You win, Eris whispered to the empty sky. You can keep your blue rock. We don't want it. He stood up and walked away from the park. The wind blew through the trees, and the lights of the city twinkled. The Xylofian Empire would continue. It would explore other stars and conquer other worlds. They would forget about the embarrassment of the defeat eventually. But deep in the archives of the Empire, the records of the Earth battle would remain. And any young commander who thought about invading the blue planet would read the warning label, beware. They do not fear death. They only fear losing. And so, the universe kept spinning. The humans rebuilt their broken ships and cleaned up the debris in space. They looked at the scars on their planet and they called them victory medals. They did not know that their enemies had run away in fear. They only knew that they were still there, and they were still free. The silence of space returned to the solar system. The silver ships were gone. The stars shone down on the blue planet, indifferent to the violence that had passed. Humanity had collided with the universe, and the universe had blinked first.